But let's talk about learning how to learn. What learning techniques has worked best for you? Because you seem to do a very great job.
Try to do a very good job. But like, I guess like the learning technique for me, at least these days, is probably something called the Feynman technique. Richard Feynman, famous mathematician slash physicist, amazing professor as well. And according to him, you can basically learn anything, which is absolutely true. And the way you do that is like, you have like a very complex concept. It could be like calculus. It could be anything, whatever it is, right? And you try to write it down and explain it on a piece of paper, right? And you have to make sure that those explanations are devoid of jargon as much as possible. Like if you can break down an explanation of a very complex topic into like an entire like explanation without using jargon and without also losing detail, then it just shows that you've understood a concept. But if you feel like, oh, you're using jargon within your explanation too, and you're not able to explain that jargon, that means that there are holes in your explanation. And then you need to further, try to dig into those jargon terms. This actually comes very, very apparent when you're reading research papers, because I can't tell you how many times, I think you've done this too, of like, you read a paper for the first time, right? And then you understand barely half of what's going on because there's so many words in that paper you just do not understand, right? And then what do? You look at those words and then you Google like what those words are. And then you get into this rabbit hole of like Googling words and then Googling words in those words and then Googling forever, right? Until eventually you'll be like, okay, I now understand what's going on because I've broken down the jargon of this entire paper. So I would say learning technique is like, just make sure that when you are explaining yourself, make sure you understand every word that you're trying to say or trying to write in your explanation. And I think that will go a long way.
And that is called the Richard Feynman technique.
Yeah, it's called like the Feynman technique in general.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. It seems like I've been doing that without knowing what it's called. When I would take a complex topic and I'll decompose it into little subsections and make sure I understand every subsection, that I can write an article on it. It sounds time consuming. It is time consuming. But from your perspective, is it time consuming?
It is, but when you're coming to the fields of like mathematics, especially, I'd say especially mathematics and especially like in science fields, it becomes increasingly important because like, I don't know, let's say that and if you're working especially professionally, right? You know that you're going to be talking to a lot of people who do not know data science, anything about data, right? And if you built this like very fancy schmancy model and you want to explain what it does and how it does things the way it does to people like product managers or people who are in charge of projects, you need to be able to explain that in a way that does not use technical terms, like very technical terms, right? You can use like maybe some technical terms, but to the extent that you think that your audience will know, like your audience being like these people who you're interacting with at work, right? So I think it just becomes, all the more so important. It's in the same with students too. It's not like you can explain all of that jargon of like any kind of like Bayesian statistics with more like, oh my gosh, like talking about posteriors and priors, like everybody knows what they are, right? Like you need to break that down as well into like understandable forms and words. Is it time consuming? Yes, but it's also required, especially for interacting with people. Maybe like, even if you're writing a technical paper though, like I would think that you would need to understand what's going on too, but I know there's a lot of people who probably don't. They'll probably use like blanket terms that they don't completely understand. But in general, I'd say like as a rule of thumb, it makes more sense to understand what you're saying. And also, even though it takes time to do so, it is worth it.